there was no way I would ever put myself in a position to come back to prison. And if so many people were coming back to prison, there had to be a disconnect. And it just felt like a roadmap was missing. But a roadmap that allowed each person to enter based upon wherever they were and what they needed and based upon where they were going. The technology closes the digital divide. Technology is used to solve some of the world's biggest problems. And today, we have an opportunity to solve the problem of allowing people to come home ready. Hi, my name is Teresa Hodge. I'm the president and CEO of Mission Launch, and
I'm Laurin Leonard, the president and CEO of R3 Score.
So we're really excited to be able to talk about our journey in and out of prison. And when I say our journey, it's really my journey in to prison. And I was fortunate enough for my daughter, Laurin, to take that journey with me. So let's just dig in a little bit and talk about it.
We'll start for just a second and we'll talk about the companies, because I think a little bit on the companies will help make the journey kind of make sense. I'm a person who I love the end before the beginning. So we started Mission Launch in 2012, and I was a grad student at the time. And you at the time were incarcerated. And I think one of the things that's always interesting is, first, I know some people, entrepreneurship and necessity entrepreneurship, so becoming an entrepreneur out of necessity because you just can't get a job, is something of interest. And there's always a question of, when should you start a business? Why do you start a business? And our business, Mission Launch and R3 Score, is out of our lived experience of your incarceration.
Yeah.
So Mission Launch is a nonprofit. We are committed to making sure that folks shorten the time it takes to get back on their feet by way of working with institutions and government partners and community members. And that led us to start R3 Score, which we started in 2008 together. So we are a mother-daughter co-founding team. And so
2 times.
Yeah, which means obviously we enjoy working together because we did it twice. But I think now let's go back to kind of a little bit of the beginning, because what we do is deeply informed by who we are and what we've experienced. So.
Yeah. So for me, when I think about it, this is 2023. It was 23 years ago when I came in contact with the criminal legal system. And it was the first time for someone in our family to come in contact with the criminal legal system. And it was a devastating experience. You know, you were younger. I think when my case started, you were actually in high school.
I was.
By the time I went through my trial, you had graduated from college. So there was a long period of time that I was parenting and mothering and doing my best to keep you shielded from what was really taking place in my life at the time. Probably didn't do that good of a job. I don't know.
I feel like in high school, I stayed busy. It was starting to creep through. It really wasn't until the kind of break in my freshman year of college. I came home thinking I was going to take a quick break, go back to college and take some classes. At the time, I was a pre-med major. And I think that was the first time that it was like, you can't go back to school because here's what's happening. And so I just waited tables, paid cash, took classes at community college. I think that's one thing that is probably a thread of ours, which is we just don't take no for an answer and we find a way through. So
yeah. I remember thinking to myself, you were like, I'm thinking about changing my major. And I was like, oh, no. You've got to finish college in 4 years. Because in my mind, I knew with the timing of everything, I could get you all the way through college. And it felt like at that point for me, prison was going to really become a possibility. But if I take a step back, I co-founded a business with someone, and the business and I both were indicted. We were investigated. I took it to trial and I lost, and I didn't understand our criminal legal system. I didn't know that 96% of the people who are investigated and indicted either plead guilty or indicted. In other words, I had a 4% chance of not going to prison. And I didn't know that. I learned so much, and today I laugh because it was probably Law and Order is what I grew up on and watching on television.
Yeah.
And I remember often sitting in the courtroom thinking and watching and kind of paralleling my case to Law and Order. which is kind of silly today when you think about it. But again, no one in our family had that experience. And so it was a first for all of us.
Yeah. I mean, I think so. This is where, because I'm a sociology nerd, I think I always say, our criminal justice system, it's designed to be out of sight, out of mind, right? Like we teach our kids, don't get in trouble, do whatever the police say, never go to prison or jail, which then means you have no reason to think about it because that's for technically other people, right? But I think from a sociology standpoint, when we have just use our criminal justice system to solve a lot of our social problems, there's no way now for it to be out of sight, out of mind. And I think for me, I know there was a visiting experience that you always talk about that you hated because we were in a visiting room and I just kept saying like, this is just fascinating. Right. And you were looking at me like, how dare you? I'm in prison. There's nothing fascinating about this experience. But in my mind, as a social major, I just was thinking like, we have a microcosm of everybody in this country in this facility, right? There were women who were there for mental health, for substance abuse. There were women who didn't want children, women who were desperate for children. There were mothers, there were grandmothers, there were rich women, there were poor women, there were women in between. And for me, it just became an experience in which I became just so curious about like, okay, but how does everyone get here? Right. And even more than that, you had started telling me the stories of just the people who were coming back. Right. And I remember one of our conversations, your point was there must be something going on in reentry because prison is no way of living.
Mm-hmm.
And nobody is in prison saying, I can't wait to come back to prison, which means something is happening.
Yeah. No, I remember there were so many women who had just hopes and vision. And, when you get down to your last 99 days, everybody's really counting 99, 98 and a wake up, and you're getting there. And I remember just so many women just talking about how they were going to go home and get a job and they couldn't wait to see their kids. And they had all of this hope and plans. And then in many cases, about 3 months, 6 months, a year, they were back. And I kept seeing that over and over and over again. And I became curious about that because I felt like there was no way I would ever put myself in a position to come back to prison. And if so many people were coming back to prison, there had to be a disconnect. And nobody could answer for me, but why?
But I think that's where the origin story of Mission Launch makes sense to pick up because by this point, kind of fast forwarding through a couple of years, I was at grad school, I was at Hopkins, I was having my quarter life crisis. I was turning 25 at the time. Currently now almost 39. And I just was like freaking out of like, I'm almost 30. What am I going to do with my life? And I had a professor say like, I think you could be a social entrepreneur. And what he had shared with me was that I should enter into the school's business plan competition and I should try and build a business that had a social mandate, but that made money. And I remember I emailed you while you were incarcerated and I said, I think I'm going to enter into the school's business plan competition. You're one of the only business women that I know. Would you help me write a business plan? And that ultimately became Mission Launch. I think we placed third in the competition. We won like $500. But it was like the seed of us thinking maybe we could do something, maybe we should do something. We structured it as a nonprofit, and it's been around now for over a decade. But it was your experience, and I will never forget. I said, I think I want to write a business for a work-live space.
Yeah. And so for just a second, that is part of the Come Home Ready story.
Actually, yeah.
For us.
Yeah.
Because for me, I was sitting in prison, bored, and I was asking anybody and everybody, hey, if you have something you want me to read, I'll read it for you. If you want my feedback on anything, I'll give you feedback. If you're starting a business, if you're doing anything, please use me. Because I was trying to keep my brain fresh. I was trying to stay relevant.
Yeah.
That was the thing that scared me the most about, originally my sentence was 87 months. I won part of an appeal. It got it down to 70 months. But it was the thought that how was I going to be relevant in a world that was ever changing because of technology while I was in prison? And here I was now part of the digital divide. I'm sitting on the backside of a prison, and where there's the only technology was an email.
Yeah.
And it was more intranet because you couldn't surf the web. And so I was just cut off from the world. And so you saying to me, hey, there's a business plan competition, I was like, please, yes. And I remember writing stuff and mailing it to you, going on the email and sending you stuff, and you sending me
I
the
wanted
draft.
market research. I wanted
Yeah.
to know, what did the women you
And
were incarcerated with, what
yeah,
did they think they needed in their
yeah,
reentry, which
yeah.
is ironic because then that is such a long journey, to be honest, that if you think about that journey. So I would say for anyone who is also worried that they're not going to be relevant, what would you offer to them?
I think you have to choose for yourself what made you feel relevant before. And so for me, being relevant was being a mom. It was being a part of my family. It was doing business. The good news is, you said yes to the prison journey. You didn't have to, but you did, and you allowed me to remain a mom during that journey, which was so important to me. I couldn't imagine, today, having and going through that time without you. I couldn't imagine it going through that time without the love of my mom. So I was fortunate to have a mother who loved me, who never stopped loving me, and a daughter who looked up to me. And that was just such a gift, period.
So that's interesting. So let me ask you a question. If you feel like you were there, and I wouldn't say it was a gift for you to be there for how long you were there, but because you had so many months, you did get to see a lot of women come back and forth. Why do you think that was?
The disconnect. The disconnect from a vision while you're sitting on the bunk, disconnected from reality, the hopes, the dreams, the aspirations. And then it's just the reality of coming home and having the stigma of having a record. Today, I know it is the fact that you have a record that makes it where it's impossible, in many cases, for people to find a place to live, for them to find a job, to get a bank account even open. All of the ways that we connect to society in a meaningful way and build our lives, for a lot of people, they just couldn't do that. And over time, what we've learned is if a person's home for about 100 days and they're getting lots and lots and lots of no's, they are a day closer to going back to prison on day 101. And that's just like us, those are things that we know now. But when a lot of my friends were leaving, I was saying to them, when you go home, write me back and tell me what's happening, because I honestly just wanted to know. It was a curiosity that I couldn't let go of.
And so let me ask you a question. So for any family members or friends or community members who are watching this, right, now that you've been home for so long, what would you say to someone that's their biggest concern, right? That like someone that I love is going to come home and they're just not going to be able to get on their feet.
Yeah. One, it's a real concern. It should be a big concern. They should be concerned about that. So I don't want to minimize it. It's huge. I think that if a person is able to connect to housing, because we all need a place to live and lay our head every night, and if they can connect to a job, that makes a difference. Even if it's not initially a job that's sustainable where they can live on their own, but if they can live with someone in a safe environment, and if they can connect to a job. I think for me, it was those two things. I mean, maybe three. I had a loving family that I don't think you guys would have just let me fail. You would have found a way to continue to support me. I had a place to come home to. It wasn't where I wanted to live. I wasn't on my own. It took me 3 years to live on my own. But I was able to stay with my mom. She had a place and, she was accommodating. I had a sister who gave me a year's worth of public transportation. And I had a friend who believed in me before I left prison and said, I think you still have good skill sets. And he offered me a job before I left. So I came home to...
You came home ready.
I came home ready. I couldn't live on my own. It wasn't, but the truth is, it wasn't the dream that I had on my bunk either. But I was able to keep adjusting the dream until I could get to the right place.
How would you define ready? what does ready mean? Because I think what you just said to me is interesting, is like, as you were talking, I was like, oh, well, you came home ready, but that was ready for you based upon what you had. So what
Exactly.
is the definition of
Yeah.
ready?
I think each person has to define ready for themselves. And I think that's why reentry is challenging, because we have well intended service providers, well intended allies of all types around the country, whether they're politicians or business people. And we're trying to figure out what
Mhm.
one answer, one solution for 80 million people.
Mhm.
80 million people today have an arrest or conviction record. And what's ready for me is not ready for the next person. Ready for me meant I wanted to come back and get in business again. I wanted to be a business owner. I wanted to be an entrepreneur. I wanted to be independent. I left kind of like a middle class life. I wanted to get back to that. That's not the vision and dream for a lot of other people. But I think that in this country, we have to leave room and space and just give people opportunity to reconnect to whatever is important to them and allow them to live their highest and best life or connect back to that dream on the bunk. I think what we discovered was technology was missing,
Mhm.
right? That was one of the big things. For me, I felt like reentry was so inefficient by well-intended people.
How do you define inefficient, and what made it inefficient? Because I know what you mean, but let's
Yeah.
probably explain it.
Yeah. Well, there were a lot of people who were coming home desperate for housing, one person, next person, desperate for a job, next person, desperate for health care, next person, desperate, I need to open up a bank account. Yeah. All of these things. And again, I say 100 days, and I mean that 100 days of a lot of no's in each day. I don't know who can
It's ego
stand up to
depleting.
that. Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was inefficient because nowhere where a person returned home were they able to have, if you need this, go here.
Mm-hmm.
After you get that, go here, do this, do this. And it just felt like a roadmap was missing. But a roadmap that allowed each person to enter based upon wherever they were and what they needed and based upon where they were going.
Mm-hmm.
And instead, it was somebody in the local community coming up with a strategy for one person,
Yeah.
as if one person is coming home with one set of needs. I mean, that would be great. But what we know is there's a national problem called mass incarceration,
Yep.
but reentry is hyperlocal. And the resources have to be in a zip code.
Mm-hmm.
It has to be, within a 10 block radius if a person is going to be successful, because they may not have public transportation.
Yeah.
So for me, it was inefficient because we weren't using technology to solve a big problem. And that's really how, when we got to Mission Launch's real sweet spot,
Yeah.
it was, can we become a convener
Yeah.
in local community? Can we hold space? Will the community trust us to hold space? And can we bring all of the stakeholders in the room? Not just, probation
The
and
obvious ones.
parole,
Mm-hmm.
not just Dress for Success and some of the local organizations, but can we bring directly impacted people in the room? And can they tell us what they need?
Mm-hmm.
I can tell you what I needed, but I'm only one person. But can we let everybody say what they need? And can we let the service providers and everybody raise their hand and say, hey, you can get it here. You can get it here. Oh, wait a minute. You should come to us. We're fifth. Don't come to us first.
Yeah.
That. And that was the beauty, I think, when we felt like, even for us as Mission Launch, we found our home. We found our sweet spot.
Sure. For where you are today, you have been an entrepreneur for really as long as I can remember. And then there was the unfortunate event of prison. And you worked a job, but you also kind of held on to your vision of being an entrepreneur again. So you've been at this for a very long time. And you've also talked about the fact that for people, it's difficult when you're facing a lot of no's. And so just would love to hear, one, how did you personally get through that? And then also, what are you excited about? Because I think for all of us, prison or not, it is just a really weird time on this planet, right? It's been a pandemic and it's a whole lot of things going on. And I think for no matter where we are, having the ability to have something to be excited about, right? Like, and I don't say this, you know, without any context of knowing there are a lot of reasons why it is extremely difficult to wake up every day. And also, the invitation is what makes you excited? And how did you find excitement and joy even in a very difficult place? So going backwards and then coming into today, what makes you excited?
So the difference between you and Oprah, she wouldn't ask all those questions at one time.
Yeah. So question number one, how did you maintain
Yeah.
excitement while you were incarcerated?
Yeah. Well, I think that I've always been an optimistic person. But I will also say that was the time where I had no joy and no optimism. But I was afraid to let you see me feel hopeless.
Good answer.
You've never asked that question.
Okay.
Yeah. And so I feel like I was always a good mom, and I held on to that. And quite frankly, you allowed me to hold on to that during prison. And there was a visit. I remember it like it was yesterday, where you took over being a mom for a little while.
I remember that one. Good moment for me.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah. And that's when I knew one day you would be a good mom.
Oh, that's lovely.
Because it was during that time when I was so broken and I was having an identity crisis because I never saw myself in prison. And yet I was in prison. And I was trying to hold on to a future and trying to also recognize I had to shed everything to just be fully present and to be one in community with the women. It was the only way it was going to work. You know, I wasn't an outsider. I was one of them. And we were sharing this journey together. And so it was at a visit where you were trying to rebuild my confidence and my hope. You came like a teacher in there and you were like, I found this book. I read it last night and this is what it says. And you have to have a vision, Mom, and you got to do this and that. And you were doing stuff. And you came back the next week and it was like you were giving me a seminar. And on the last day, I said, I got this, Laurin. You don't have to come back for a little while. Yeah, because you fed my spirit with what I needed. And it was enough. And at that point, I was really tired of myself. I was like, okay, you got to do this time, possibly all of it. And if you're going to have to do it all, this person over here who you've raised cannot keep coming here holding your hand through the process. So that's what really got me through was you were brokenhearted. My mom was brokenhearted. And I was like, I am going to literally kill the people who love me if I don't get my act together. So I mustered the courage and just, had to daily figure it out. And in doing so, a form of joy returned, and I figured out how to live and create life in this new world.
So I'm going to pause right there and kind of unpack what you just said, which is, I think, important, which having an anchor to be able to ground yourself is a key part of it because you can feel like you are just, and I think one of the things that you actually have said before is you lose time even when you have so much time. Like there's just the ways in which
you feel all 24 hours in a day.
Right.
And there were days when I would pray, God, give me the strength for this day. And I'd have to go to bed at 6 p.m. because I had no more energy to give that day. And it was just like, I've got to start over again. And it was day by day by day until, I felt like I had something to look forward to or that I could engage with the rest of the women in a way. Prison's not a place where you can sit in there cry for 7 years. Nobody would have been interested in that. There were women who had a level of empathy because they all had their first day in prison as well. And so many were very compassionate, but you got to get your act together if you're going to do that time in that space. And so, I knew I had to figure it out. And so maybe one of the lessons is in all places, you can find contentment and joy if you choose to.
It's a choice.
And there was a day that I had to just choose to find contentment. I still wasn't happy with what was going on in my life, but I was not going to make it. I wasn't going to survive if I didn't, you know, change my attitude a little bit.
So that was feels like that was a heavy moment. So maybe what we'll do is we'll pause for just a second. So before you answer kind of what I did when I buried a bunch of questions, which was what are you excited about now? What brings you joy now? Maybe let's kind of go into, so you were coming home. We had emailed about coming home. We had planned coming home, and this is about coming home ready. So like, what was something that you wanted to do? I know the answer, but I feel like other people should meet this part of you as well.
Well, it was going to be exciting to put on clothes again. You know, like I'd been wearing prison uniforms for a very long time. And so I was excited about putting on clothes. And I remember putting on clothes and feeling like I looked pretty cute in my clothes. And
you had lost weight.
And
we were like,
we're not going to talk about weight on this episode, all right? So, yeah, but so there were a couple of things. One, I was looking forward to seeing an iPhone because the iPhone came out after I went to prison. And so I was
sending you articles. And you're like, but I just don't
understand all of this stuff.
What is it?
Yeah. So I was looking forward to that. And then I wanted a good meal. Oh my God, I wanted a good meal. Like prison food is just horrific. It really is.
Yeah.
Nobody's going to ever say they had their best meal in prison. Like it just doesn't happen. And so on the way home, I wanted Cracker Barrel.
Yes, you did.
And I don't know what it's called, but it was a sampler. I had one pancake, some hash browns, a piece of bacon.
It was all the things.
A good cup of coffee, orange juice. So I was really excited about that. So that was one thing.
I remember picking out your outfit. So like we wore matching outfits, different but similar. I remember, and I kept saying like, Mom, but what size pants you were? You're like, I don't know. And your pants were so big. Because that's the other thing that I don't think I even thought about, which was you can gain or lose weight, but like you're not going to stores to try on clothes. So you have no frame of reference. I know you said that like, I think my feet size changed. And so it just was like a stab in the dark. But I remember you coming out, we were all dressed the same.
I didn't realize that at first. It was my sister Tammy, you, my mom, my niece Gabrielle, and Gabrielle brought a girlfriend. And it took me a while to realize everybody had on pink.
Yep.
And so I had a pink shirt on and white pants.
I styled everybody. Per my usual.
But it took me a while to realize that. But even when you think of that, what a welcome that many people cared enough about me.
It was a whole caravan of people.
Yeah, to come and to wear the same clothes in solidarity. So we all sat around Cracker Barrel table eating. Oh my gosh, and I forgot. When I went to prison, I arrived at prison and 7 women, it was 7 of us that arrived and checked in on that day. And it was Diane, remember? Yeah.
Auntie Diane.
Yeah. She only had a 12-month and a day sentence, which means she was only there for 10 months. But we became such good friends. She supported me the entire time that I was in prison.
I called her Auntie Diane for a reason.
Yeah. And
a stranger at the gate.
She met us at Cracker Barrel.
She did.
To welcome me home. I just remember that.
She's like, Mom's coming out. Where are you? I'll meet you for breakfast.
Yeah.
And so she came. And I will say.
And she drove like
friends
4 hours to have breakfast with me my first day.
Yep. With that, for me and you, we talked a lot about our relationship and our journey. And just for context, I am my mother's only daughter. She, however, is one of 5 girls. My grandparents had 5 daughters. And so we've always had a good relationship, right? And I think now the older I get, the more I understand how special our relationship is, for mothers, for daughters. And I know you had mentioned that for you, that was one of your biggest concerns. But I'd be curious for you to share with the audience and folks who are watching, how did it feel to come back home as a mom, right? Because there was life before prison, then there was prison, and then we were building a life after.
Yeah. So what's clear is I missed a lot of things over the course of 5 years. Our life, we managed to continue a relationship together, but there were a lot of things that were happening. I gave you permission that, hey, if while I'm gone you get married, that's fine. I didn't want you to hold and stop your life completely for me. And I don't know. I feel like for me, and you may feel differently, it was kind of a seamless integration. In one sense, you were my guide. You helped me to, okay, mom, this is technology. Like you helped me to get back, even though, I thought I could just jump right back into technology. It was probably 20 generations later of technology. And so you helped me to use Microsoft Word again. The smartphone, oh my God, it might have taken me a year to figure that completely out.
When we were in the car driving from Alderson, I remember handing you the iPhone. I remember watching your face. You were like excited to scroll. And then your brain just like,
I got overwhelmed.
Couldn't compute. Like
No,
you just were
I
like,
said, here, take it.
We're done. I was like, really? You're like, we're done.
Yeah, because it was overwhelming. I had not been exposed to technology. I was craving technology, but I had not been exposed to it in a long time. And it was just overwhelming seeing everything. And people were calling me to say, welcome home.
The texts and the phone calls were coming in.
And it was just a lot. And I remember going on shutdown a little bit. It's still overwhelming. Like I remember the first time I went to a McDonald's and I was thinking, when did the menu get this complicated?
Because now the menus were on these like
LED
like
things were scrolling and I was like,
I think that's the piece that sometimes is lost, which I feel like for the folks who are watching this and anyone who's actually watching it on a tablet, there are little micro tech moments that happen, right? So you pay to park now with an app, right? You order food with an app, right? And I think there is a huge conversation eventually, maybe that'll come up in one of the episodes about just like, I just don't think it's safe, right? To unplug millions of people and then plug them back up. And I think that, I'm extremely nerdy. If I'm ever back on another episode, we'll talk about all my things that I'm nerdy on. But there is a huge conversation about access to technology as a human right, because you cannot function in a modern world without it. And so I think that was the piece that I was personally committed to, was making sure that like you didn't get left behind, because I just felt critically important. Also, I think it's important you were always tech forward, right? She was always committed to technology. So
you were the first person to have a computer,
a desktop computer, right? So like I think 100% our roles reversed. I think when I think about you coming back home, there is a statistic that says the most disruptive time in the life of a child is when a parent comes home. It's not when a parent leaves, because kids are just naturally resilient. And I think there's a part of this, even though I was an older child, you figure out a new way of being. And then when a parent comes home, you have to figure it out again. And I think there is a piece of this where children sometimes do take on more of an adult role in the family, except for the adult's home. So now there's this weird competing energy of like, but who's the real parent? But I think that's something that happens in the integration piece of it when you have parents and you have children. And especially if it's a parent who's incarcerated, there is a dynamic. And I think even years later, you said to me one time, you're like, but when are you coming home? Because I think there's a component that when you do time with a loved one, they have an out date, but sometimes you don't. Because you're always thinking about them as someone who was incarcerated. So I think that is something that eventually probably can and should be unpacked, which is how did you help your loved ones come home? Because you were physically gone and you were physically back, but people might have still been in the mindset of you being gone.
Yeah. And I feel like for me, I'm still coming home. I say that often. I have not landed where I haven't connected to my dream on the bunk yet. Like,
well, let's come back to that. So you haven't connected to your dream on the bunk. And one of the questions that I asked you is, what gives you hope and what are you excited about now?
I'm excited, I think, now about the work I'm currently doing. In the last 6 months or so, I sat down with myself and said, clear the deck. You've been doing this work now for 12 years since you've come home. And I want to know what it feels like to do nothing. And it's in about 2 to 3 years, I hope to be closer to that doing nothing phase and being closer to retiring and just, mentoring and coaching and helping people. So the work I'm doing today is a part of that journey. And it allows me to kind of land the plane. I love coaching, I love mentoring, and I love helping people. I think it's just baked into my DNA. And before I went to prison, because I was a business person, what I knew was when I came home, I was going to prison. So I dedicated my life to prison, and I didn't have the language of reentry. I didn't know what, that was a thing. But in one sense, what I thought about was you're going to spend more than 10,000 hours inside of a prison. So you're going to understand prison, and I went to prison crying literally for myself. I left prison crying for the women I met who I wasn't sure if they were going to see the moment. I didn't know if they were going to have the opportunities that I had. I didn't know if they could make all those connections and navigate.
Because it is a lot.
It is a lot.
Mm-hmm.
I knew I had as brokenhearted as I was for myself, I knew I had the ability to survive when I came home. Again, I felt like my family was going to be there. They were going to keep adjusting the space for me, however it needed to happen, and that I had enough skill sets to navigate and survive. I went to prison at 44. I took good skill sets to prison. I knew it. But today, it's the work that I do. We talk about Securus Original. I chair their board. I love this work. And I feel like it is the game changer because I'm back where I started. The digital divide.
Yep.
The technology closes the digital divide. Technology is used to solve some of the world's biggest problems. And today, we have an opportunity to solve the problem of allowing people to come home ready, whatever that looks like for them. And I am committed to making sure that we get the right content on this tablet that speaks to every last person on prison so they can see a Teresa and know it's possible. They could see other people who've gone to prison, who've come home and have navigated their lives, and they know what's possible, that they can dream a dream and get the formula, the roadmap to connect to the opportunity.
So let me ask you two rapid fire questions.
Okay.
The first is you do have a tremendous amount of privilege. We have a tremendous amount of privilege with the family we were born into. It is literally a lotto. For anyone who doesn't have that, is there any advice or anything that you would like to say to them because that is such a foundational piece of your success?
Yeah, I think what I will say is what I've seen work, which is people come home and they recreate family. Family is not a safe place, is what I've learned for a lot of people who go to prison because it was maybe the institution of family that failed them. And so in those cases, the people who I know who have been successful, they come home, they find new friends, they become their family. So there's the DNA that we share, and it's the family we create.
Very cool. And if someone is watching this, either on the tablet and they want to contact their family to figure out how to get in touch with you, or a family member sees it themselves, how can anyone find you, and how would you like to be supported?
Well, I'm all things Teresa Y. Hodge, Teresa without an H, on social media. So whether it's LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, X now,
Twitter, who knows?
You can find me there. Also at missionlaunch.org. We're available. We want to help you. But if you're on the tablet, I invite you to go to, there's R3 Up, which we're really excited about. And there are a lot of resources, and I am channeling lots of resources there. We have a network of formerly incarcerated people who have successfully come home and have navigated their own reentry, and they're going to serve as peer mentors, sharing information of what worked. Because what worked for me, what I know is it's not necessarily going to work for everybody. If you didn't come home to the Maryland, D.C. area, some of these resources may not be available in your community. So we're going to provide lots and lots of resources that are available to you nationally, but more importantly, locally, because reentry begins at home.
I'm going to ask you another question.
Sure.
What is your vision for the podcast?
I think it's, I wish I could think, one way, but I don't. I think for people who are incarcerated, it's to give hope. Hope is a commodity that's lost in prison. And so I want people to feel hopeful about their future, and to know that anything is possible, that you can dream a big dream and you can dream it safely with this podcast. You can dream it safely with this tablet, and that when you come home, the support will be there. I think for governments, I want them to think bigger and better about the people we've incarcerated. You know, like we have to have a big vision for people. We have to create opportunity. We have to leave space for people to be able to come home. We know who we send away. We don't know who's coming home. We have put people in this system we called correction. Well, if corrections did its job, then different people are returning home. And so we have to have pathways of opportunities for those folks. And for people who feel disconnected from this issue and they don't get it, it's like, maybe they'll look at me and say, wow, I would have never thought that lady went to prison, you know? And if they are in a position to hire, to open a bank account, to have a conversation in their corporation, let's do that. Because it's going to take all of us working together to create pathways of opportunities and to just take away this economic burden on individuals, families, communities, our society, our government. So we've talked a lot about me, and I'm going to get to be the Oprah for just a second. Tell me about what you're doing now with R3 Score and this new product.
Absolutely. So we talked about the fact that we started two businesses together. Our second one is R3 Score. We started it in 2018. And it was really as we were facing kind of this same issue in Mission Launch, which was how do we get people around the background check? Because for 9 out of 10 employers, 4 out of 5 landlords, 3 out of 5 college universities, anytime you would go, you and anybody goes to be considered for an opportunity, there is oftentimes that box that says, have you ever been convicted of a crime? Check or not check. And do you authorize us to run a criminal background check? So R3 Score is a better background check. We set out on a mission to just make it where we could help businesses manage the risk that they thought they had, but also better understand people with records. And we felt like who better to redefine and modernize a legacy risk model than folks who are directly impacted. So that's R3 Score. And as we continue to do that, we have been helping folks get jobs across this country. We've helped people get loans for banks. We've had a ton of interest in housing. And we are extremely honored and grateful to be able to launch a brand new product officially first here on the Inventive and Securus tablets called R3 Up. We always knew as a family, we would eventually support folks while they were incarcerated. We intentionally picked Reentry when we started in 2012 because it just felt like the place that we could have the best impact. And so coming back closer to the gate and working with people before they're released is our product. R3 Up is going to be coming soon live on the tablet. We're going to be providing content in jobs and workforce, life skills, education, reentry planning, and well-being. And well-being for us means physical well-being, mental well-being, emotional well-being, as well as some cool games, some entertainment. And the real purpose of all of this is, as Mom talked about the need for a roadmap, is one of our key features is a reentry planner. What we know is the ability to sit and think about your plan and even adjust your plan in real time according to how much time you have or maybe don't have is a critical component to that. And so far we've received great reception and would love to get your feedback on it. So any way that you can communicate to us and tell us what you want the app to do for you. The goal is for you to be ready for reentry on day one. And it kind of fits with the topic of the podcast.
So what does come home ready mean for you? Because even though you haven't gone to prison, you've supported hundreds of individuals, you've met hundreds, thousands of people who've gone to prison. When you think of come home ready, what is ready?
Yeah, I think so. I'm probably going to have a philosophical answer because I have the privilege of not having gone to prison. So I apologize in advance. But I think, to be honest, I default into a mindset of preparedness, because there is no way to predict what's going to happen. You could feel ready and then something catastrophic happens the very next day, right? But if you are equipped with a spirit of resilience, if you're equipped with just an unbreakable mindset, I think that that is the definition of ready. Because again, having lived through a global pandemic and so many things in the last like 3 years, I don't know if we can tell people that if you do these things, you're ready. But what we can say is, let's get you equipped. Let's give you a toolbox so that when you're confronted with a situation, you have resources and you have the capacity to solve the problem that needs to be solved in that moment. And you just keep solving problems until you get to your destination.
You've kind of summed up reentry, which is just nonstop taking everything that you've learned and pulling it in that moment and having to keep navigating and keep navigating and keep navigating. So R3 Score is the product that's for folks when they're
home.
When they're home, and R3 Up is a form of powering up.
We want you to get powered up. And the exciting part is we'll be able to help people kind of think about their criminal background check 90 days before they're ready to be released, so that when you are thinking about your reentry journey, you're thinking about the jobs that you want to apply for, it helps you understand, okay, if I were an employer, kind of what would they be looking at and how do I create a shorter route to success? If the whole point is it's a bunch of no's the first 100 days, we're trying to figure out what is the first possible yes you can get and how do we just keep stringing those yeses along. And I think the piece that I'm super excited about is this concept called Justice Sandbox, which you actually, as the chairwoman of Aventive's board of advisors, brought up. So actually, I'll let you explain what that is.
Yeah. So when I was asked to join the board, I already knew one of the things that I wanted them to do, because technology is my thing. And I saw the value of having a tablet in the hands of every incarcerated person. And that was the vision that they were saying. And so I understood that was going to be a game changer all by itself. And so I asked, are you willing to give an unfair advantage to those people who have been directly impacted by the criminal legal system and allow them to bring their knowledge and know-how of what it's like to return home and navigate to this platform? Fortunately, they said yes. And so that's called Justice Sandbox. And the sandbox is a sandbox just like every other developer box. You know, all of the other bigger brands have them as well. And it's just a place where directly impacted people don't have to figure out how to plug in to this tablet. There's a plug and play kind of box that's available to them. And it makes it a little bit easier for them to bring an R3 up on the platform and honest jobs on the platform and so many others. There are a lot of people who have gone to prison who have come home and who are building technology. And they're building technology around reentry and incarceration from their lived experience. And that lived experience has value to this company. So we're really excited about R3 Up being one of the first 3 companies to go on there. And Hope Media is another one that's already on there that people are connecting to, and honest jobs, searching for jobs. But the whole goal is, when Justice Sandbox is full of apps, that there are lots of resources, opportunities, and information. You could be returning home in Hawaii or Alaska or Tennessee or Missouri or Maryland. It doesn't matter where you're going. You will have the right information to help you navigate your prison experience, but then also your reentry. So I'm excited about that. That's part of my 2-year, 3-year, and I'm landing and done.
And super excited for the journey that you're on, and happy to help everybody get ready to come home.
Thank you for taking it with me.